The MMORPG space has the capacity for some games to just seemingly come out of nowhere, yet then fall back into silence, with no further notice on their current development. In my most recent video, I discussed PAX Day, another MMO that has only recently released their reveal trailer after being fairly free of development news over the past year. And whilst it isn't atypical for MMOs not to provide information on their development process until firm updates, there still tends to be even small amounts of information that floats around. However, the subject of today's video has been a bit of an enigma when it comes to releasing public information, and even with the information that is publicly available, it still leaves a lot open to imagination and conjecture. And the name of this MMO is The Quinfall, not just Quinfall. Today, we'll be taking a look into the current information disclosed about this upcoming MMO, looking at the current official footage from the game, and gathering my initial thoughts on the matter. But with that being said, let's jump into it, and see what the world of Quinfall has to offer. The first question we need to ask ourselves in this case is, what is the Quinfall? Well, if we take it from the developers themselves, they advise the game is intended to be a sandbox MMORPG, based on their most recent FAQ released on their own Discord. Coupled with the notice on their Steam release page, we see that the Quinfall is intended to be one of the many upcoming MMORPGs that appears to have their roots firmly sat in the sandbox arena, rather than the theme park experience. However, in contrast to another upcoming title, Ashes of Creation, the developers have confirmed that this game will be running on the Unity engine, rather than that of Unreal 5. This is as the developers are able to implement their own technological developments easier on this game engine. But stepping back from the technical aspects for now, the developers have set the scene for the game being in what I would describe as a grand fantasy setting, with the idea of the storyline and progression therein will likely be a backdrop for the players and their sandbox experience. And to match this potentially grand fantasy narrative, the developers have announced that the map for the MMO at the moment will be a massive 2,016 kilometers squared in size. Now, a number like this is hard to imagine without context, so let's get this into some perspective. Based on the original developer notes, the size of Elder Scrolls Online's Cyrodiil map was approximately 100 kilometers squared. In summary, the size of Quinfall's estimated map size is therefore approximately around 20 times the size, plus a little change. This will put the game world as one of, if not the, largest intended size for an MMORPG world that I can personally recall to date, although there does seem to be an element of confusion about how the world itself is created. In an article translated via Technosteria, the developers advised that the world was not created by a generation tool, but a further Q&A done by another content creator, Sir Medieval, would suggest otherwise. Whilst this may just be an error in translation, even without the intervention of any artificial generation tools, the idea of having an extremely large map may be a welcome sight to some, but a daunting and off-putting element to others. The world also has other developed systems, such as weather conditions and natural disasters. As mentioned in the interview, there are already further ideas for natural disasters that would affect the world to be announced in further developer diaries. But no world filled with either the influence of weather or natural disasters is complete without the creatures that flesh out the world and provide players with the active measures of combat that they deserve. Combat is based on a non-targeted system, and the weapon-based gameplay shows the function of the weapon is to provide the style of gameplay for the player without restricting the player by a character-based progression system. For example, they cite that a character using a blade will naturally gain experience in the blade skill, which will assumedly give them some sort of bonus to this element. They also make reference to the fact that there will be sub-mechanics to the combat that may impact gameplay further later down the line, citing that they do not want to restrict their players to archetypes, and using weapons as the method for gameplay styles also makes me think of Albion Online's system, with the traits and skills being tied to a player's determination to advance based on their desired playstyle or a favoured weapon. And while none of this is concrete at this stage, it is certainly an alternative take on the combat process, and it feels as if they are giving players further agency to make their own choices. But this agency is not only pushed from the measures of combat players will face, but the fact that they are also providing goods and services to the world of Quinfall. As cited in the video, this is by providing their own taverns or shops to the economy, alongside other hosts of minor actions, such as minigames. Players will no doubt have an opportunity to provide their services by supplying the market with their own attempts at gathering and crafting, such as utilising the mentioned skills of hunting professions to furnish the market with their own wares. There is also the alleged ability for players to be able to tame various mounts, some of which that may simply help with traversing the wide world, or caravan mounts, which we all assume are for supplying goods across the world. And with this wide open world, players are shown to be able to go about making their own home or location for themselves, likely providing them with a good base to push and enjoy their adventuring goals out in the wilder places that are on offer. From the high open seas, players will likely be able to seek out adventure and the dangers alongside, and with dungeons being dotted throughout the world, players will be able to delve into these deep places to search out long-lost lore of the land. And whilst this may keep the PvE player at heart content and happy, PvP is not left in the dark. PvP is suggested to being an opt-in system, suggesting that players can willingly engage with which section of the game they desire without penalty, as well as having their own dedicated servers. It feels that with the things on offer, that the scope of the game being considered is almost as large as the world that it's meant to be set upon. But this does lead us rather neatly into what my conclusions are based on the current information that we have. Now, to preface this section, I'd like to start by saying that the information that I obtained to this video wasn't necessarily the easiest to locate. After all, elements of the research were either by the medium of their own Discord, wherein they published and updated their FAQs, translated articles such as Technosteria, or via other content creators. Sir Medieval specifically was able to get the developers to answer some targeted questions into the game's development, and I'd highly recommend that if you are interested in the topic, that you have a look into their update videos, as they were certainly some of the most helpful for providing further and updated context. Now, you might be wondering why I'm building up to this particular point. Well, it has to do with the fact that with the lack of open information, many tend to be left with assumptions on the game. After all, when a game is announced to some fanfare and then no subsequent information is provided, some may come out with ambivalent comments, whereas others may come out with some more stronger or harsher ones. It isn't unreasonable to assume that this would be the case when there is such limited information, but we do need to take some things into consideration, such as this isn't an English-speaking developer by trade, meaning that some of the comments that we may look for might not be in our own language. But if we do step away from this lack of open information, what do I think about the circumstances and the case for Quinfall at the moment? Well, firstly, I'm not against the content produced so far, nor am I against the spirit of what I believe the developers intend the game to have. Any new sandbox title for me is a positive, providing players with the agency that is often left by the wayside, and putting the onus on the player to enjoy the game for what they can make of it, rather than get fed a theme park experience. To that end, the idea of an expansive open world is appealing to me. With the distances being in play, players will likely need to plan whatever journeys they take, and no doubt with the potential of the taming system, standard and caravan mounts will aid not only those simply wishing to get around the world, but will help those who dedicate themselves to crafting to haul their wares around the world as well. Players having to provide shops and services may be seen as tedious to some, but to others, it may promote self-reliance and/or opportunities for guilds and groups to seek out niches in the market. PvE and PvP are separated into servers or channels, but the intention is for both to factor into the game, allowing those who hold the flame for either style of gameplay, or for those who enjoy both to simply do that. With the combat system being tied to weapons rather than a character, players are given the potential to be free with what they try, to mix, or to dedicate themselves to whatever style they fancy, giving players a wide variety of choice based on the current notice that we have. And whilst I haven't gotten into the elements of the deeper lore, the game cites that there is a time travelling mechanic that might be involved, but I'll leave any speculation to this to when the game actually launches. All in all, Quinfall has put forward a strong initial position in terms of what the game could potentially do, in my opinion, but without further current information or footage for the moment, the best we can possibly do is speculate. And whilst this speculation isn't grand, the developers have announced that the game will be going into closed beta later this year, although they have already made ways towards confirming that future developer diaries and releases are due before this. The closed beta has also been noted as the only way so far that players may gain access to the game pre-launch, which has also been noted to have a boxed price afterwards. As well, the game is intended to have a limited monetization and avoids being paid to win from the information that we have. To that end, I would suggest that anyone who is potentially interested in trying out Quinfall put themselves forward for getting into the closed beta later this year, as it would naturally give those interested the means to see if the game is for them. For the moment, however, I feel that after a little digging, Quinfall may be a reasonable MMO in future, albeit it could do better in providing further evidence via their upcoming developer announcements, diaries, or updates to help mitigate any issues regarding the lack of information. I, for one, will be putting myself forward for a closed beta access, and hopefully we'll look forward to it later in the year. But with all this said and done, what do you think about Quinfall? Are you interested in this upcoming sandbox MMORPG, which may have something for everyone? Let me know in the comments down below, and let us have a good discussion over another new upcoming MMORPG. If you've liked the video today, please don't hesitate to throw a like onto the video and subscribe to the channel for more MMORPG content in future. This has been Rivalry, and thank you again for watching. Take care, and I hope to see you again soon.